Morning, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. I am your host, Sharifa Hardy, and do I have an exciting show for you today? One of the things I know we're going to discuss is marketing, and we're going to start with one of our marketing experts, Kim Beeler of Beeler Marketing. Good morning, Kim. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well.
How's
nice to be here.
It's nice for you to be here. How's everything going on in your world?
Well, it's been pretty rocky. The past month in quarantine has been tough. I lost a 10-year client, and that was really tough. When they, shut everything down except for big business, a lot of small businesses are stumbling right now. And, they said when the curve went down or flattened, that we'd kind of get back to some sort of a normal life, safely, but get back to work. And we're not seeing that happening in a lot of states. And that's a problem for the economy.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. One of the things that I've noticed is absolutely the same thing. When I'm looking around, all the local small businesses are closed. And then you have the large chains, the large fast food chains, the large box stores. They're open and they're getting the business, and they have lines out the door. Even just because it's the 6 feet quarantine, they still have lines out the door. And you go by all the local businesses and you see closed. Or that, like my favorite Mexican restaurant, I love ceviche. They are only open from, I believe it's 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's the only time you can go in. And you used to be able to go in, have a wonderful meal, enjoy your day, talk to your friends. And now you basically have to get dinner by 2 p.m. if that's what you want to eat for dinner. So I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that with you. But again, we are going to be talking about marketing. So I want to move over to Carla Williams Johnson, and she is a media marketing specialist. Good morning, Carla. How are you?
I am good. Good morning, everyone. How are you?
We are wonderful. Where are you located, Carla?
Well, I am actually in the Caribbean. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and we are on total lockdown here as well. Only essential businesses are running. I would say all small businesses that are non-essentials are indeed closed, at least for the next couple of weeks. So I feel and I hear and I'm experiencing everything you just said, Kim. It's very real over here as well.
Yes, it's a global pandemic. It's affecting everyone around the world, which is why I enjoyed having the show and the opportunity to speak to so many different people. We've had people calling from Ghana, from the UK, everywhere I can name, we've had different guests. And for the most part, everyone is having the same experience. And we also have Dr. Joyce. And Dr. Joyce, you're an expert at cosmetics and surgical and medical dermatology, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for having me. I mean, I think my perspective is very different from marketing, but I am not only a doctor, but a small business owner. And so this quarantine time has really presented very unique challenges for me as a physician. I come from a family of physicians, and one of the things that my brother and I were talking about yesterday is like, can you believe that there's a global health crisis that's actually crippling the vast majority of physician practices? And most of us are at 10% of our usual capacity of patients that we're seeing. So I'm hoping to shed some light on, the medical perspective of COVID-19, but also the perspective of a small business owner. And it's really helped me to understand that it's important to have different streams of revenue, right? Because I never thought as a doctor that I wouldn't have patients to see. And that is a problem for people across the specialties in medicine.
Absolutely. We're going to take a look at a lot of different perspectives today, not just marketing, but when we think about marketing, it is every business, no matter what it is, to a certain extent, has to have some element of marketing, whether just a business card or hanging out your shingle so that people know that you're available. And it's something that affects all of us. One of the things that I've learned, at least from talking to so many people during the show, because when I first started, it was people would say, oh, this doesn't affect my business. What I found is no matter what business you're in, what industry you're in, it has affected you in some form or fashion. The hospitals here, people don't want to go to the hospital with anything, minor, obviously, because the hospitals are jam-packed with people who are suffering from COVID-19. So it's affecting everyone in a lot of different ways. One of the things that people are concerned about is their wealth. So we have Michael Hess, who is a wealth management advisor, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. Good morning, Michael. How are you today?
Hey, good morning, Sharif. I'm doing really well, thanks.
Think and Grow Rich, one of my favorites.
Yeah, have you read it?
Yes, I have. That's what I think about, growing rich.
Well, that's awesome. And you're right. This the COVID-19 has really been affecting everybody's, not only their wallet and their investments, but their psychology of investments. And part of my job as a wealth management advisor with Park Avenue Securities is to keep people focused on the long term and to help them and guide them through what we're going through right now. If your time horizon really hasn't changed, then we don't have to be too concerned with short-term volatility in the accounts, in the portfolios. That's not to say that we don't feel it and we're not concerned about it, but if our long-term time horizon hasn't changed, we can get through this. And typically what we do is we plan for the unknown and the uncertainty. What our job is to protect people's cash flow, because like Dr. J was just saying, she never thought that she was not going to have patients coming in to see her. So that's affected her cash flow, right? And we like to protect first, foremost, and forever.
Excellent.
I love Dr. J, by the way.
I did too. I noticed that, but I was going to kind of let that go.
I'll take it any day.
I have a question for Michael.
Okay.
In the sense that, I'm a good saver. I save for a rainy day. I have a SEP, I have a Roth, I have a cash account. What's frustrating is, I'm in for the long term, but I just lost, if I'm, understanding what I'm hearing, I just lost 4 years of gain. Is that correct? And is it going to take 4 years for me to gain it back? What's in the stock market and mutual funds and...
Well, it's really impossible to know how long it's going to take to recover. But I was reading this morning, the S&P 500, since its bottom in early March, we're back up 31% from there. And it's not to say that it's necessarily going to hold, but it also, to put it in perspective, it's but it's down 10% from its peak in late February or mid-February.
So I didn't lose 4 years. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't have your account in front of me, but I suspect that
it was a comment that was made on like national TV. Like we just lost, like it was like we as a whole,
Right.
You know how they are on national TV, right?
Well, yeah, and that's part of the thing. On national TV, you have to remember the commentators, they don't have a securities license. So they're not, they can say whatever they want, right? And typically the crazy thing is, you always see, those people or in newspapers, the market soared today, the market plunged today. Yes. Well, if you got into an elevator, if you were in Las Vegas and you were, going somewhere, or New York City to, a high-rise building, and the up and down button said soar or plunge, going by the stairs, right?
Yeah.
You would not get in that elevator.
No. Or an airplane.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And so those people, they can say whatever they want. They can print whatever headlines they want. People that actually have a license, like myself, we're bound to do what's in the best interest of our clients, and we can't just say grandiose remarks. We can't make grandiose remarks like that. So, again, getting back to your portfolio, I would suspect that you did not lose 4 years of the gains that you made. And if you didn't move your investments and get out of what you were in, you didn't lock in any losses. Now, there are strategies to take advantage of some losses that you could implement, but, I'm not
that would entail buying right now, right?
Well,
white.
It depends. To lock in some losses, but to stay in the market, you could, and you'd want to consult with your tax professional, your financial professional, but you could sell, let's say you had, a mid-cap growth fund. You could sell that fund and get into a similar fund with a different company. So that would be a potential strategy.
Okay, thanks.
I'm loving that. I'm taking notes over here, Michael.
Yeah,
I know they're generic.
Me too. Mid cap growth fund.
I know they're generic.
I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that, I'm not making any recommendations here yet. I would have to, I'd have to definitely sit down with you and while we bring this up, one of the problems with traditional financial planning is that the conversation generally starts around a product or around a certain rate of return. And it's such a disservice to people because without knowing the lay of the land and where you are right now, today, and what the picture looks like overall and what your financial goals and concerns are, it is so inappropriate to start a conversation with that. So what we like to do is find out the lay of the land so we can move forward with a confident approach, knowing what the next step should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And I was having a discussion the other day in that there's a blessing in every curse. And just like I mentioned earlier, Zoom stock you mentioned soared, it soared. Nobody seen this coming. We didn't know that this was going to happen, but there are certain things that just like Zoom. Even Microsoft is coming out with basically a Zoom competitor. Everybody wants to get in the Zoom game to a certain extent. The other thing that I saw was that grants. Facebook has a $10,000 small business grant. If you're familiar with Hello Alice, if you go to helloalice.com, they're giving away $10,000 for small business owners. So there is money available for the small and local business owner because they have been affected more than anything else. One of the things that I saw is more advertising. In my 6th district in Long Beach, our councilman is sending out emails about the local businesses, letting us know these businesses are still open. Please support these businesses. I see some of the local Long Beach news putting out Facebook ads, letting us know, support these businesses. You get a discount at these businesses. Has anyone else seen any type of marketing or advertising push to get the message out about the local or small business?
I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, though, because as a small business, I've definitely tried to keep track of some of these grants that you mentioned, especially grants that are trying to support minorities in business or women in business.
Yes.
And so you hear about them. So, for example, Spanx, the company, the shapewear company, they're putting out grants for small businesses, to support women in business. Shea Moisture is doing that. There are lots of different companies that have mentioned that, like nationally on the news. But I do find that when you go to apply to these things, there's little guidance on how to do so. Sometimes they don't have the applications up and running. And I think that, for me, for example, many of my colleagues have tried to apply for the PPP loans or, the CARES Act or, different ways of just trying to make ends meet. And what has been surprising is how often small business is used very liberally. And so you find really what I would consider large businesses who have taken advantage of those resources to the great disadvantage of small businesses. And then you hear about banks that kind of selectively picked those larger small businesses because they also got more profit from doing those kinds of loans than giving a small loan to a small company. And so I feel like, you know, it gets a bit disheartening, actually, because it's like, yes, we want to support the small business, but then how much of that is just, I guess, lip service, for lack of a better word?
I completely agree, because I applied for the CARES Act, still waiting, right? But you hear millions spent on big small businesses. Like, seriously, Yale is a small business. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. And then I went to this bank's website, couldn't find the fund, you know, and I even contacted customer service specifically about it, and they sent me to a link that still didn't send me to apply for the grant. So I just think that, you know, companies even like Spanx are saying they're doing things, but, you know, whether or not they're doing it, I don't know, but seems like they're saying one thing, but maybe not actually following through.
Yes, I noticed that too.
I can't really comment because I'm not from where you all are, so I can't really comment on, you know, you are trying to apply to different places. But what I can say as a small business owner, we need to get more strategic, and we can do our own advertising. I mean, a lot of people tend to think, you know, maybe a Facebook ad here or a Google ad there is going to work. But what we could probably do as small business owners is to try and advertise, figure out what is the best way based on our budget to advertise our products and services to the people that need us. Now, it would be great if these people can help us, but sometimes, you know, maybe we just need to help ourselves and just be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more, you know, in tune with what people are going through now and how we can help them, for sure. Because when this whole pandemic hit, at least here in Trinidad and Tobago, when this whole pandemic hit, one of the businesses that actually increased was delivery services. Even I myself decided to include a delivery service to my business because what I wanted to do was help business owners and entrepreneurs who don't have that delivery service to bring customers to them, or maybe for them to go to their customers, right? I decided that I was going to be that link for them. And I have seen an increase in my business because of that one additional thing that I've included to help business owners. Now I know I'm talking from a completely different side of the world. Well, I shouldn't say a different side of the world, but I'm talking from a different perspective. But Kim, can we agree as marketers that maybe if we look at advertising our products and services and seeing how we can help our customers and being more strategic with our advertising, that maybe that's going to help more than trying to figure out where to get these grants from or where to get this help from?
Well, one of the things that you said was, you know, it may be different over there. And one of the things that I've seen and one of the things that I've learned that is different, and this will probably, obviously, most likely never happen in our lifetimes again, is that this is a global pandemic. It's affecting everyone around the world in pretty much the same way. I mean, maybe things are a little different or you operate a little different, but businesses around the world have been affected.
Well, why I said different is because we don't have access to all these grants that you're talking about. We have access to government grants, but we don't have these people coming out and saying to register for this or sign up for that. We don't have that here. It's the government or nothing, right? It's the government or self. That's how we are here. Now, there are different people who are getting into the PR space, as in helping the communities. Maybe if you cook food, you know, they will give to, if you have kids under a certain age and stuff like that, they would do that and they would promote that, right? But that is on self, that's on them, right? But we don't have all these, I don't know what you all were talking about, but we don't have all these places that we can sign up for things. We just don't.
I wanted to say two things. One, from the medical perspective, Sharifa, I think that we are at a turning point where we should realize that the possibility of global pandemics is a real one, and that we need to kind of incorporate that into our long-term game plan if we're going to be successful.
Mhm.
I remember when I was in college, I read a book. It was like yellow fever and black plague. And I graduated from college almost 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was talking about bugs and how they're getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter.
Mhm.
And I think that we now live in a world where globalization is what it is. People
Mhm.
are, barring this kind of catastrophe, people are constantly traveling. We're constantly moving.
Mhm.
And so I think, one of the things that I've really been humbled by, and one of the things I'm thinking about in my recovery plan, is actually planning for contingencies like this, because I think that part of the reason why America in particular has been so paralyzed is because, we just didn't think it would affect us in the way that it has. We are very used to, with other large, disease epidemics, Ebola and other things, they've been so far away, right? And so
Right.
we haven't had to think about it in the same way that, other people have. And I think that that is why America has a third of the global cases of
Right.
COVID-19. So that's something that I think we do need to think about for the long term in every aspect. And I think that the second thing I'm really thinking about, and Michael can probably talk to this a little bit, is like the so-called rainy day fund, and really understanding what that means now, because I have been so surprised by colleagues who have been in business for almost 20 years. I'm a relatively young physician, and I am in my first year of private practice, right? My first year of not working for someone else. But there are colleagues who've been at this for 20 years, and they were lamenting that they could only make payroll for 2 weeks,
Oh, wow.
right?
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks, one more cycle of payroll. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean about what kind of savings you have?
Right.
Or what does that mean about, kind of how have you been living? So we kind of live for today. You make that money, you spend that money, or I don't know. But I find myself, getting even more like, okay, put more money under that rock, because you don't know when you're going to need it. And I'm not in absolute panic right now, because like Kim, I have been saving and 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 saving. I'm the child of immigrants, and so I grew up with very little. And so I always try to kind of make sure I have a nice, juicy pot so I sleep without too much anxiety. But I can't fathom what people must be feeling if they don't have those resources at all, even people you would otherwise think are well off.
Well, they say the average American doesn't have $400, right? For a $400 unexpected $400 bill. That's the average. I don't know how true that is. Maybe Michael knows, but that's another thing that's been thrown out into the news.
Well, yeah, so again, it goes back, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's not my company, Park Avenue Securities opinion, but there's such a problem, as I mentioned before, with traditional financial planning philosophies. And Dr. Joyce, to pick up on what you were saying with how some of your colleagues that have been in practice for themselves for such a long time, they don't have the liquidity or the savings. And part of it goes back to, as I said, the traditional financial planning. When you first go into the workforce, the advice that is given by your parents, by your financial advisor, by your HR person, by your boss, is to save for retirement. You should put money into your 401k, right? Has everybody heard that?
I agree. Yes.
Right. That's what everybody says. But okay, let's say I'm 25 years old, I'm 30 years old, and I don't have liquid savings. Why would I put money into a 401k at 25 or 30 years old when I don't have access to that money till I'm 59 and a half, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I get a tax deduction. Great. I'm only 25 or 30 years old. I'm probably not making as much as I'm going to be making when I'm 40, 45, 50, 60 years old. And I'm setting up this reverse tax bomb because at my retirement, when I'm able to take that money out, then my taxes are probably going to be higher than what they are, right? It's like, if somebody told you to put your socks on over your shoes, right? They're both necessary steps, they're wrong order. And so that's what I preach to my clients, is let's protect your savings, let's protect your cash flow, but let's do it in the right order, right? There's a priority to having liquidity. And if people were doing that now, then they would have liquid assets to be able to tap into in case of these rainy days that we're seeing right now. Or if there was opportunities, which for a lot of people that have cash right now, there's tremendous opportunities to be investing because, you know, the stocks have come down and they're at a discount right now.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. A lot of stocks, but the question is, do people, back to the grants and the loans and getting the money, do they have the money available? And to Kim's point about having $400 available, most Americans, sorry, Carla, we just speaking about what we know, but are living one paycheck. That's why I honestly was surprised by what Dr. Joyce said about not, 2 weeks, and you've been in practice for 20 years. That's surprising, but I also know that most Americans are living one paycheck away from being homeless, one emergency away from being homeless. One thing happens, like a global pandemic, and there's nothing that they can do.
well, one of the other interesting things about the PPP is that, and unemployment, as it relates to unemployment income. I saw a study that the average restaurant worker makes around $500 a week. And so they go on unemployment, they can get $250 a week. But right now, there's also a $600 stipend that's going on for the next 8, I think it's 8, maybe 10 or 12 weeks. And so they're actually netting $850 a week, not working. And so, but in order for the restaurant owner to be able to not be penalized on the PPP because they have to keep their workers on, they can't fire anybody if they want to have the loan forgiven, then they have to keep paying them. But the worker is saying, well, hang on a second, I'm making more not working than I am working, so would you please fire me? And now the restaurant owner, is caught in the middle, and it's this weird kind of loophole that wasn't really thought out when the PPP was put in place. So be careful if you are applying, and if you do get a grant, make sure you really know what you're allowed to and not allowed to use the money for, and how you could possibly be penalized.
Yes, and from the unemployment perspective, that sounds wonderful, but it's my understanding, that's why I'm glad you brought that up, Michael, that it wasn't across the nation. Like, I know here in California, it's $600. So I'm curious as to where you're located.
I'm in LA also.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, for other places, they may not even get that.
Right.
I just want to say something a little controversial about the fact that we have a loan/grant. And that, Carla, is very American, because I'm someone who's lived in a lot of different countries. And so I was talking to some of my friends in the UK about this and kind of lamenting about how am I going to keep my practice afloat? And she said, what are you talking about? Don't they have grants that they're giving you guys? They're giving grants. I mean, it's called a grant. It's called what it is, right?
Yeah.
The government is giving money to small businesses so that they can kind of stay afloat. Yeah. And I think one of the dilemmas of this PPP is it a loan? Is it a grant? Is it a loan?
Yes.
I mean, I took out a lot of loans to start my practice. I have no interest in having more loans, right? But if you have, I call it magic money. When you give me some money that I wasn't expecting, if you have some magic money for me, I'll take it if you're going to give it to me and let me keep it. And so I think that makes a lot of people scared, myself as well. Initially, I didn't go for that first round because I said, I don't want any additional loans. And it's quite complicated to say, oh, you have to keep your employees in place. You have 8 weeks to spend all this money. Well, the reality is that we're not necessarily going to bounce back in 8 weeks. And if I was a little cavalier about it in the beginning, like, yeah, I'm going back to work. Both of my parents got coronavirus 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry to hear that.
and my sister. They all live together. And 2 weeks ago, like the panic that set over me, you know, as a physician, even it was just sheer panic.
Mm-hmm.
And
where do they live, Dr. Joyce?
We live in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And Massachusetts is a state that's been pretty hard hit. But, you know, my parents are in their 70s, and unlike many Americans, they're actually relatively healthy. They each just have one kind of thing they're dealing with. But, you know, I couldn't talk to them for a week. Like, they didn't have the breath to talk for a week. And, you know, my thing was like trying to keep them out of the hospital, because I feel like once you're in the hospital, that's it, right? So anyway, long story short, that experience, which just scared the living daylights out of me, has really made me respect this virus. Like, it earned my respect, and I don't want to play with it. You know, my brother works at New York Presbyterian, and everyone knows that New York is like, you know, zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
And he went into the ICU. He's a surgeon, but then there are no surgeries. So he's, I'll go volunteer at the ICU. And then he thought he had corona. And he said, you know, I thought to myself, this is the stupidest thing I could have done to, you know, if I'm there, but I don't have to be there. You know, he has 3 young kids. And so I'm just, you know, talking from the perspective of those of us who are used to kind of being on the front lines. I started residency when we had the H1N1 and, you know, people were in the ICU. And I remember that. But this is something different.
And Dr. Joyce, I think you bring up a good point. I think people, they're not respecting it until it hits home.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree with that.
Right. So everyone's like, I'm going out, you know, I want to go out. And then you get the corona and you're like, nope, I want to stay in.
Or you know somebody.
You go first, right? You go first. You check it out. Let me know how it is.
Right.
And, you know, jokingly, like, Georgia, okay, you go first. Let's see what happens. And then I'll go, because I'm scared.
I can only speak for myself. I don't know anybody who has COVID. And before Governor Brown shut us down, I shut myself down. I knew enough. Once it hit our borders, now when it was in China, you know, I was talking to a guy in January and he was like, oh my God, I'm selling all my stock. I am getting out of the market. That's coming here. And I thought he was overreacting. I'm in for the long haul, right? I'm like, oh my God, you're just freaking out. Well, guess what? And then it comes here. I still didn't sell my stock, but I stopped going out to bars, you know, and I work from home and I just stayed home except to go grocery shopping. And this is another point I wanted to make today is, you know, I feel like some governors and states have handled this better by not completely shutting down non-essential businesses, because you tell a mother, a single mom, or a father who's the sole breadwinner of a family for a household, you tell that guy or mother that their income is non-essential. Tell them that. And so I have a real problem every time I hear non-essential business, non-essential worker, because I just wrote a letter to the editor that was printed about this. And, you know, in the state of Oregon, you know, 95% of the people tested are negative. Okay. We've got like 90 some deaths, and we got over 300,000 livelihoods unemployed. And I have a big problem with the numbers. And again, we all stayed home. We did the right thing. We were afraid of COVID-19. We did that, but we've almost flattened the curve here in Oregon. We have some counties that don't have it at all, or very, very few cases, very rural. And I do think now is the time we have got to restart the economy, and not just hospitals, not just dentals. I mean, that's who's opening tomorrow here in Oregon. It's just dentist offices and doctor's offices. The rest of us are still non-essential.
Excellent point, Kim. I think that's the main question that's in discussion everywhere right now, is the question of reopening. I don't know if anyone saw Vegas. They were having a discussion of opening up Las Vegas, and the mayor said, basically, we'll just make it a test market and see what happens. So if people die, that's part of the process, but I want to reopen. They're reopening Georgia. And some people say it's too soon. Some people say they shouldn't have shut down all these non-essential businesses. So it's a question that I think most people are discussing, but nobody really has the perfect answer at this point. Dr. Joyce, what are your thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Kim. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, you know, we can do it safely. Look at the businesses that have been open this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the businesses that have been open. They have showed us how we can do it. In like Florida, for example,
Yes.
he saw right away the vulnerable, because in Washington State, which is our neighboring state here in Oregon, that's where the first cases started hitting. Like 7 people died in a senior living facility.
Mm-hmm.
So the governor of Florida saw that without anybody telling him what to do. He shut down his senior living facilities. He's like, only, you know, people, essential people going in there, no visitors, no non-essential people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, they were showing the graph of, you know, the states that did the best in terms of the least amount of loss in senior living facilities, and it was Florida. They were at 1-point-something%, and it was because he took quick, decisive action based on what he was just seeing. And again, we can use common sense, like South Dakota. You know, the governor said she asked her people, she did put some stringent rules in place without shutting down one business. The only business she had to shut down was Smithfield because of the amount of cases that came out of that meat processing facility. And she did the right thing there, you know, and then they're trying to reopen it now because, you know, again, if you see a problem, deal with it. It just like in life, you know. We have lockdown drills in schools for a reason, right? So when you see a problem, deal with it, be proactive, but we can't shut down schools, right? You know, did we shut down schools because we're afraid of, you know, gun violence? You know, no, maybe we get smarter about who we let into schools, or maybe we look at maybe doing more e-learning. I do think we look at silver linings in a pandemic like this. You know, pollution's down, wildlife is flourishing. You know, we are seeing that people can work remotely. You know, maybe business owners should take a look at if they can trust their workers, hey, to work from home, they should work from home. Traffic's down, traffic accidents are down. Let's look at the silver linings and maybe do business better going forward. You know, restaurants doing more cleaning, tables cleaning like the ketchup and the mustard bottles after people leave a table. You know, in the past, I remember not wanting to touch the ketchup bottle because I was afraid of who had touched it before. You know, I think we can do better. And for example, I ordered takeout the other day, and there was it was a beautiful day. There were these picnic tables everywhere. It's like, why can't we sit here at this picnic table, you know, outside, not inside, you know? And so instead we had to go to a park somewhere else and sit at a picnic table somewhere else. It had to be off site, you know? And so I just think, again, we're keeping businesses strangled down when we can go back to work smart and safely, you know, cleaner. You know, if we have to wear masks, let's wear masks, gloves, I don't care.
Well, yeah, but Kim, that's the thing. Like, you're coming from a rational standpoint, and like what Dr. Joyce was saying earlier, a lot of people, probably the majority of the people, they're not really respecting this until either they get it, or a loved one gets it, or, you know, a very close friend gets it. And I think we have so many people that are just cavalier still because, you know, they're saying, oh, this is a senior citizen disease, and they're not really looking at the numbers fully.
Yes, and let me just, I'm gonna let you speak, Dr. Joyce, but I just wanted to say this. Also, I think a lot of things are affected by where you are. And I'm in Los Angeles County, but within Los Angeles County, Long Beach has the highest rate of COVID-19 in LA County. But there's a reason for that. Long Beach has the port of Long Beach, and the port of Long Beach brings in it's one of the largest ports in the nation, if not number two. It's one of the largest. And so a lot of things that are coming in from China and coming in from a lot of different places in the world, they land right here in China, in Long Beach. So it's not, for us, it's not just the senior citizens, it's the senior centers, it's what's coming in. So we have a lot of cases here. So we may handle it different from even where you are in LA, Mike.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, the other things that have been on the news is the demographics of where it's hitting. Unfortunately, in the lower income areas, families they're living together, more people in smaller places than out in the suburbs, and they don't have access to as good of medical care. And so that's an issue too. When you brought up, Kim, like South Dakota, and not that I know much about South Dakota, but
I don't either.
I don't either. So for the record,
I know it's more rural than, Long Beach or LA or even Lake Oswego, right? So, there's there's a lower density of population. There's more land, there's more ability to get outdoors and be apart from people.
Less cosmopolitan, less people traveling. I mean, I think that one of the good things and the bad things about the United States is that it is extremely diverse.
Yeah.
And if you think about other countries, other nations, we are one of the largest, and space-wise as well. And I think that we're going to get into trouble if we start to try to generalize that what works for Paul is going to work for Peter. And I think another concern that this is forcing us to really look at is that we tend to be a very individualistic nation, right? We tend to think individual rights take priority. But I think that what this pandemic is teaching us is that we are not that individual anymore, and what affects one person can affect another person. And so, yes, coming from a state like Massachusetts, or having half my family live in a state like New York, having had my parents have, the coronavirus, my perspective is very different, right? Because we have to be extremely careful. One of the things I get very frustrated by is when people kind of say, well, the coronavirus affects African Americans, blah, blah, blah. I was even talking to my dad's doctor about that when we were trying to figure out what to do. And I said, listen, we have to be very careful when we say things like that, because that is kind of, institutionalized discrimination. It's not necessarily about race. It is about resources. Right. And so if you're living in a place where you have 10 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and yes, you're essential. If you work at McDonald's and that is your income for your family, yes, that's essential income. But you are a ticking time bomb to get this virus, as opposed to me that lives on an acre of land with a family of 4, and that has nothing to do with my race. That has to do with my money, right? So I think that we've got to take a step back and for the first time, maybe do something very un-American and make a plan that thinks about these details, because we all think, I think South Dakota is very different, right? Maybe people don't travel as much there, right? Maybe they're not going in and out of the state as much. Like you said, they have more land. But New York, Massachusetts, California, the bigger states, it's not the same. And
it's true, but we've handled this though like a one-size-fits-all,
right? And I think
pandemic, and not necessarily in the Caribbean, but here in the United States, we have treated it, and half the cases are in New York, in the United States. That's just ridiculous too. We've treated all these Democratic states, all these Democratic governors have just got together. I feel like it's political now. And I think it's why they're keeping us shut down now, because it's not just about COVID. They want you to think it is, but this is political too, because it is making Donald Trump look bad. If the economy stays, in the pothole dump, then he's going to go into election in November, not very popular. But I can tell you, I do think that these Democratic governors are going to be surprised, because I am holding them accountable, and I can only speak for Oregon. but we have so few cases here, and we have flattened the curve here in Oregon, and we shouldn't be reacting the same as New York or New Jersey. And it's like, again, we do, it's not a, I'm sure in your practice, it's not a one size fits all. You take it you look at every patient differently, and you deal with them very differently, right?
Right. I think that the main thing is that before we open up any state, we have to have protocols that we can all put in place. One, we need to be able to have testing.
We're already doing that.
We need to be able to have testing.
Protocols are in place, testing. We have testing. And guess what? You can take a test on Monday, contract the disease on Friday, okay? So what testing is also doing is it's a false sense of security. People will be reckless if they take a test on, Thursday, and then they go party on Friday. Oh, whoa, I'm free, No, you can get COVID.
A couple things from a medical perspective. I think that one of them is testing. I think the second thing is just making sure that we have enough personal protective equipment for all the healthcare workers, because I think that that is a strain that is really unimaginable right now. And a lot of healthcare workers are working around the clock and also taking decreases in their income as well, and their families are in jeopardy as well. And if they die, what happens to their families? And I think that the last thing is just being able to have good contact tracing. So I totally, especially for me, my livelihood right now is in jeopardy, just like everyone else's. Like, we all want to open up. I think that we just have to be careful to make sure that our government as a whole, right, can get every single state the tools that they need to open up safely. And I think it'll be an interesting experiment to see when one state opens and one state doesn't. Is that creating kind of an unfair advantage if you play devil's advocate? Okay, now you get to start making money, but I don't. I mean, like you said, maybe those are some.
I want to move to South Dakota, frankly.
I am not moving to South Dakota, not moving to South Dakota at all. And whoever is watching the Roundtable Talk Show in South Dakota, I apologize if there is any South Dakota bashing right now. But I know it is not the tourist spot that Long Beach is, so I just want to say I love my city. But this is one of the most debated shows I've done, and I love it. I love the crosstalk, and the conversation is hot. It's interesting.
But I have a very important question.
We're gonna ask your question,
because I'm
go ahead, Carla.
Listening. I'm listening to everything, and I'm almost like an outsider looking in, right? So I'm listening to everything, and as you said, Sharifa, this is a lovely debate that we're having. But my question is, once you open up these states and you open up these businesses, remember the virus, you need to kind of protect yourself at the personal level, right? Because that's basically how the virus spreads. If you don't wear your mask, if you don't wear your gloves, etc., etc., etc. How do you police the people to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do? Because that's an issue that we have here in Trinidad. Our culture is not one of social distancing. It just isn't. It's a very foreign concept to us. So to make sure that everyone stays 6 feet apart, there are different markers at different institutions and stuff like that to help. But generally, we are not. We are not a social distancing type of crowd. So once there's a gathering, you would find people in very close proximity, a lot of people in a small space. And one of the issues that we have is, how do we police the people if it is that we do decide to open up? So I'm just curious, right?
Well, there's a sign in restaurants that say no shoes, no shirts, no service, right?
Right.
We can just, we have to go back to a new normal. I'm not saying we go back to normal, but we go back to a new normal. And trust me, Costco, Fred Meyer, huge stores that have been open are doing it. They're doing it.
But my question is, for the people that are not, what would be the measures? Do they get arrested? Do they get their licenses
let me answer your question, Carla. Let me answer your question, because I think that question is going to take us in a whole different area, which I usually love, but I'm trying to bring it back right now, Carla. But let me answer that. I think that's part of what I was going to say initially, is that nobody knows. We don't know. I do agree with you, Kim. that it is political, but I also believe that it became political because no one saw COVID-19 coming. This wasn't something where someone
right.
said, okay,
Now
let's
it's a
give them
convenient
COVID-19
excuse.
and Trump can win. Like that was
It's a
not a part.
convenient, no, now it's a convenient disability for us to, our Democratic leaders, to use. I'm sorry, but the late night talk hosts, you know, months ago were saying we need anything. We need to do anything to get him out. And I just think that I'm scared to think this and believe this, trust me. But now that's the only thing that makes sense to me, because we'll never have enough testing. We just won't. I've watched CNN, Sanjay Gupta. You know, I've watched and listened to the epidemiologists and the scientists, and there's no amount of testing that will ever be available. The only thing that will make us truly safe is a vaccine.
There are a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, but the thing is, no one knows for sure what to do. And we've looked at history. We looked at history from a lot of different perspectives, from a lot of different things that happened in history. And we said, you know what, that was not the right decision. But right now, everyone is trying, I believe, trying to do the best they can to make the best decisions for everyone in general. One of the things that we learned, one of the things that I mean, nobody wants human loss. I believe that in my heart. I'm an idealist. But what I believe, and one of the things that we learned and looked at, not only just the disease, but what are we manufacturing? What are we manufacturing here in America so that we are not so dependent on other places in the world? Usually what happens is that we try to correct one problem and solve one problem, and we don't understand or realize the impact that specific problem has on something else. But as a people, as a whole, as a globe, I believe that people are just trying to do the best that they can. Michael, I'm going to let you speak because you're back there laid back just listening. So I just want to give you a moment real quick.
Sit back.
Yeah, no, I'm just taking it all in here. Sharifa, I agree with you that this actually may kind of shrink the globe in as much as trade and where things get produced, and potentially have a less reliability on China in particular. Yes. With what they manufacture, you know, for all of our domestic companies. But if that does happen, then there is, like you're saying, there is another shoe to drop, and maybe that is where the goods that are produced now, they cost more, right? And so that could, while it could drive up wages and put more people to work, it could also drive inflation. So, you know, there are always pros and cons to any decision that comes about.
Well said. Dr. Joyce.
You know, I think that for me as a doctor, you know, my thoughts are always first, do no harm.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things I'm grateful for is the humility that comes from a situation like this. And I think that we all have our principles and we all think we know what's right. But Mother Nature has put us all in timeout. And the purpose of a timeout is to have reflection, and hopefully to understand, you know, when you put that kid on timeout, it's kind of saying, you know what, it's not all about you. And so while I think we're all suffering, I think that I hope we come away from this situation with that as a new norm as well, that what affects my neighbor affects me as well. And ultimately, I think that kind of mentality will really allow us to get through this better and hopefully prevent, like you said, Sharifa, have this be a once in a lifetime event. My concern is if we think too individualistically, we're going to continue to kind of keep, you know, coming upon these stumbling blocks, because whether we like it or not, we live in a global world, and that's already happened, and that will always be the case.
Absolutely. And so you see on the Roundtable Talk Show, I never know where the show is going to go. I have the marketing companies. I'm like, yes, we're going to talk about marketing. Somehow we wound up all over the place, but that's why I love my life. I love my job. I love what I do. I love speaking to some of the most amazing people in the world. And what I love to do at the end of every show is just allow my guests the opportunity to speak directly to the audience who's listening and just give them a few final words that you want them to take away from your appearance. And Kim, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'm just going to say I'm looking for the silver lining in this. You know, I do think we should not be so individualistic, about our neighbors, whether we know their names or not just family, not just friends, everybody. And I see the learning in this is there is no such thing as essential and non-essential workers in businesses. I hope we've learned that. And I hope we also learn to go back to work, but go back with a new normal, with new safety procedures in place. And I hope that we continue to keep our freeways. We don't need more roads. You know, we just need to work smarter, not harder, but smarter.
Amen. Carla.
I would just like to say that I do agree with Kim with the working smarter and not necessarily harder. I do think that we need to be, as business owners, need to be a bit more self-sufficient in the way that we promote ourselves and the way we put ourselves out there and the way that we promote ourselves, not just for our businesses, but for the people that depend on us, our customers, our employees, and everyone else. So my final words are just take it one day at a time. We don't know what's going to happen. This is our new normal. We don't know what the future holds, but definitely reach out to someone to help you be a bit more strategic with what you do. And even if it is that you find that you can't take it, it's all too much, it's stressing you out, and you have all these different things in your head, just reach out to somebody, vent, talk, trash it out, but don't stop. Just keep going. Regardless of what happens, just keep going.
Just keep going. Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, my silver lining and my takeaway for this is that I've actually gotten like 2 hours a day, if not 2.5 hours a day back in my life by working from home. Sharifa, you know the traffic in LA.
Yes, yes. At 405.
Oh, it's crazy. And my distance is only about 13 miles back and forth from my office to my house, but it's at least an hour both ways, especially at prime hours. And so I'm able to actually not only save those 2 hours, but I'm able to speak with and help more of my clients throughout the day, because now I have that time back where I can just, most of my planning and everything can be done on a Zoom meeting, can be done via email or a phone call. And so now there's also a better work-life balance, right? I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 girls, and I get to be around with them, and they're doing online schooling. So while there are disruptions through the day where they barge in, can you help me with my math? It's still it's a joy to be around them. And I agree with Carla and with Kim. We have to be smarter, and we have to look out for our neighbors and protect not only ourselves but protect everyone around us as well.
Yes. Do you feel that you're going to completely go back to the office, or are you going to incorporate some aspect of working from home moving forward?
I would say there's going to be much more working from home. In fact, I've spoken with a bunch of my colleagues, and when our lease is up, we're thinking about just maybe getting like an executive suite, and only using it when we need to, because there are some clients that still really want the face-to-face. They still really want to see that you have an office. In the financial services business, a lot of people are still kind of on the old school mentality where if you don't have a fancy office to go see your advisor in, then you must not be any good. And but things are changing. So
yes, I'm seeing that as part of the new norm. More people are finding that medium, that in between, as opposed to completely at the office. I want to work completely at home. So definitely, Michael. And Dr. Joyce, I'm sending you and your family so much love. I'm going to give you a big virtual hug right now. Take us out, Dr. Joyce.
I mean, I think for me, what I'm most grateful for is, the simple things now, health and family. I mean, I think working with sick people every day, I've always been grateful for my health, but I think I'm grateful for my colleagues. I'm grateful for those of us who are working day and night to try to come up with a solution to a very complicated problem, and I believe that we will. And that timeout comment, it was kind of cheeky, but I hope that, the silver lining in all of this is that it causes all of us to reflect on those areas of our life where we feel like maybe there's room for improvement. There are new ways that we can do things that allow us to spend more time with our family and our friends and those things that are important, that we reevaluate what matters. Because I think that when you come to the end, most of the time people are not necessarily thinking about, oh, I wish I made another whatever amount of money. They're really thinking about, I wish I had more time with our loved ones, their loved ones. So for me, that's what I'm trying to use this time for, to really reflect on what I'm grateful for. And then I think that the next thing is that we're all going to have to reinvent ourselves, and to be okay with change, and to be okay with not knowing and not having complete control. Because ultimately we really don't. We just think we do. And so I think that hopefully as we become more okay with those things, we can kind of get things, back into right alignment again. I love what Kim was saying about the environment. I'm loving that. It's so amazing to see what this brief timeout has done for, the earth, to see ozone regenerating in areas where it's been depleted over, decades. That's amazing. And so, that I believe in a higher power, and I think that there are certain benefits we're getting from this that we'll see for generations to come, for our kids and our grandkids, and, as far as just having a sustainable environment. So, we'll see. We'll take it state by state. I agree with Kim. It has to be state by state. But we also have to think about the greater, United States as well.
I think we should start in South Dakota. I'm just saying. I don't know why, but right now South Dakota is where I want to just start this. But you know what? When I requested guests and I said specifically, I'm looking for people who are opinionated, all of you came through. You gave your opinions, you were authentic, you stood in your truth, and that is what the Roundtable Talk Show is about. So I want to thank you all for bringing your A game today. Thank you for being a guest on the Roundtable Talk Show. I invite everyone who is watching this show to support our guests. Again, that's why I put their links to their websites in the post, in the video. Support them, follow them on social media, because I can tell you right now, they have something to say. And if you are interested in being a guest on the Roundtable Talk Show, please visit my website at AskSharifa.com. Until tomorrow, everyone have a safe and a blessed day. Bye now.